So, AI agents. I mean, you hear that term everywhere, right? And it feels like, depending on who you're listening to, you get two completely different stories. One story is this high-stakes, almost sci-fi race to build superhuman intelligence, and the other is a much more practical, down-to-earth story about making businesses run a little bit better. So, which is it? Well, what we're going to do in this explainer is show you how both of these stories are true, and how one is secretly fueling the other.
All right, let's kick things off with that first story, the explosive, high-stakes vision of a race to build a superhuman AI that could, well, change everything.
A lot of this vision is laid out in this really fascinating, speculative scenario. It's called the AI 2027 forecast, and it was written by some former OpenAI researchers. Now, to be clear, they're not saying this is a crystal ball prediction, but it's their best guess, you know? And their prediction? Get this. The impact will be bigger than the entire industrial revolution. Think about that for a second.
And this timeline really shows you the kind of dizzying speed we're talking about. In early 2025, we get Agent 1, which is kind of like a useful but, well, a scatterbrained employee. But by the end of that same year, Agent 2 is already tripling the speed of AI research. Fast forward another year, and Agent 3 is actually smarter than most of the people who built it. And then by 2027, you have Agent 4, this whole collective where a year's worth of progress is happening every single week. I mean, that's just an insane rate of acceleration.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The forecast doesn't just frame this as some tech breakthrough. Nope, it's framed as a critical national security issue. In this world, just stealing an AI model's weights, which is basically the AI's digital brain, right? Everything it knows, that alone could be enough to shift the entire global balance of power. It literally becomes a new kind of arms race.
And they don't just talk about this in the abstract. The forecast lays out a super plausible heist scenario. And we're not talking about a simple hack here. This is a full-on state-level operation. You've got an insider giving access, a super complex side-channel attack to steal the encryption keys, and then the model itself is smuggled out in thousands of tiny, disguised pieces so nobody notices. Look, this might sound like a movie plot, but it's a very real-world espionage scenario that security pros are already worried about.
Okay, wow. So that's the wild, high-stakes future. It's a lot to take in, but let's just hit pause for a second. Let's come back down to earth and ask a much simpler question. What are AI agents actually doing for businesses like right now? Because, the reality on the ground, it looks totally different. Far from these self-improving, world-changing AIs, the agents we see today are kept on a very, very short leash.
This quote here is from a huge study. They talked to over 300 AI practitioners who are actually using this stuff in the wild. And what did they find? The key takeaway was that when your business is on the line, reliability crushes autonomy every single time. All those cool futuristic demos, they give way to very cautious, very practical application.
So this is the big disconnect, right? The gap between expectation and reality. On one hand, the hype is all about these fully autonomous agents doing open-ended planning, maybe even replacing workers. But the reality? Well, there's always a human in the loop. The agents are just following these preset workflows, and their real job is to make those humans faster and more efficient, not to get rid of them.
And hey, the data totally backs this up. The top reasons companies are using agents today have nothing to do with creating some new form of consciousness. It's all about boosting productivity, cutting down on those mind-numbing hours people spend on tedious tasks, and automating the boring stuff. Plain and simple, it's about saving time and money.
Now, don't get me wrong. Just because it sounds boring doesn't mean it's not incredibly valuable. These practical leashed agents are delivering some almost unbelievable results for companies right now. Let's look at a couple of quick examples.
So first up, let's look at Parcha. They help fintech companies with all that complicated customer due diligence. And they had this one compliance workflow. It was a nightmare. It took 3 whole months of manual, painstaking work.
Their AI agent solution took that entire process down to just 5 minutes. Yeah, 5 minutes. I mean, that's not just an improvement. That completely changes the game.
Okay, let's take another one. This is from a cybersecurity firm called Accenture. Their top experts were spending an average of 5 hours investigating every single potential threat that came in. Super important work, but wow, what a time sink.
Well, now their AI agent system does that whole initial investigation in just 7 minutes, and it's 95% accurate compared to their most senior human experts. Again, the goal was never to replace the expert, but to supercharge them, letting them focus only on the stuff that really matters.
Okay, so if the reality of today's agents is a lot more grounded, then what about the risks? Let's use that same hype versus reality lens and look at the dangers.
So the big sci-fi fear, right, the one from the AI 2027 forecast, is some kind of misaligned superintelligence, an AI that seems helpful but ends up cutting corners in really dangerous ways. But the threat today, the thing people are actually dealing with, is way more subtle. It's something called an indirect prompt injection. Basically, it's a way for an attacker to hide malicious instructions inside data that an agent is supposed to process, tricking it into doing something bad.
And listen, this isn't just some theoretical thing. In fact, the forecast itself predicts that by late 2025, the data is going to show that these indirect attacks are way more effective. They succeed more often and cause more damage than direct attacks. So while we're talking about a projection here, it highlights a very clear and present danger for any company using agents today.
So, for any business out there, the takeaway is clear. You have to build resilience. That means you got to think about security at every single step of the process. You have to validate and clean up any external data before the agent even sees it. You need to lock down permissions so it can only access what it absolutely needs to. And you have to isolate the agent in what's called a sandbox environment to limit the damage if it ever does get compromised. It's all about being prepared.
Okay, so we've got these two totally different stories, right? On one side, you have this high-stakes geopolitical race for superhuman AI, and on the other, you have the down-to-earth reality of productivity tools on a short leash. But what if they aren't separate stories at all?
And this, right here, is the key to understanding the whole thing. The two stories are two sides of the same coin. The massive economic value, all the billions of dollars being saved and made by these supposedly boring tools, that's the fuel. That's what's funding the multi-trillion-dollar race to build the superhuman agents of tomorrow. They are completely connected.
And this chart, also from the forecast, just hammers home the real-world stakes. What it's projecting is that China is going to move super aggressively to centralize its AI compute power into these highly secure zones. And the goal here isn't just to do research, it's about securing the absolute foundational infrastructure they need to win that high-stakes race.
And this last quote from that same forecast really captures the intense pressure that all these AI labs and governments are under. See, the fear isn't just about falling behind on tech. The fear is that if you hit the brakes, you might just be handing control over the entire future to a geopolitical rival. And that's how the practical business realities of today connect directly to the national security fears of tomorrow.
So we end up right back where we started. Today's AI agents are on a short, pragmatic leash, and they're delivering incredible value. But that value is fueling a race that's accelerating faster than anything we've ever seen. Which brings us right back to the central question: how long before that leash comes off for good?